1,000 pounds sisters S8E10. Explosive update: Tammy Slaton's secret plan to break Amy marriage shocks fans. The air in Kentucky carries a specific weight in the autumn. It is humid, clinging to the skin, heavy with the scent of decaying leaves and the distant smoke of burned piles. It is the kind of air that feels like a holding pattern, the quiet before a storm. For Amy Slaton, that storm had a name: October 31st. For an entire season, viewers of TLC's 1,000 Pound Sisters have watched the clock tick down to this specific date, a Halloween wedding that was supposed to represent a fresh start for the youngest Slaton sister. But as Season 8 barreled toward its explosive conclusion, it became terrifyingly clear that the wedding dress was just a costume for a much darker drama. While the official synopsis of Season 8 Episode 10, titled Getting Mercenal Right Now, promises a surprising confrontation that derails Amy's big day, the reality of the situation, the raw, unscripted, devastating reality, is far more complex than a simple reality TV twist. This is not just about a fight at a wedding. This is the culmination of a years-long emotional war. As the family gathers at the haunted Talbot Tavern in Bardstown, the ghosts aren't just the props Amy ordered for her spooky aesthetic. They are the lingering resentments, the childhood traumas, and the dangerous codependency that binds Tammy and Amy together. To understand the explosion of Episode 10, we must first walk through the minefield laid out in the preceding 9 episodes. We have to look closely at the man in the groom suit, Brian Levorn, who fans have accused of brainwashing Amy. We have to feel the sting of Tammy's verbal venom, which cut Amy to the bone by labeling her a deadbeat mom. And we have to sit with the terrifying possibility that the sisterly bond, once the only thing keeping them alive, might finally be the thing that destroys them both. Season 8 opened not with a bang, but with a fracture. For the first time in the show's history, Tammy and Amy were not functioning as a unit. They were, as TV Guide noted, living parallel lives. Tammy, having conquered a nearly insurmountable weight loss journey, was trying to discover who she was without the wheelchair and the oxygen tubing. She was volunteering at animal shelters, attending job interviews, and navigating a serious relationship with her girlfriend, Andrea Dalton. Amy, conversely, was in a state of chaos. Fresh off her divorce from Michael Halterman, she had plunged headfirst into a relationship with Brian Levorn. While Amy claimed she was trying to learn from my mistakes and becoming an adult for once, her actions suggested a woman drowning in anxiety, clinging to the nearest life raft. Her obsession with a haunted wedding wasn't just a quirky personality trait, it was a metaphor. Amy was trying to marry death, or at least the idea of the macabre, to distract herself from the dying of her relationship with Tammy. The distance was palpable. In earlier seasons, Tammy and Amy were often physically inseparable, sharing beds and breathing the same stale air. In Season 8, they occupied different stratospheres. The silence between them was louder than any screaming match they'd ever had in a Dr. Proctor's office. As the wedding planning progressed, a sinister narrative began to bubble up in the fandom. Viewers, those hawk-eyed detectives of body language and subtext, turned their attention to Brian Levorn. He wasn't just the new boyfriend. He was the gatekeeper. In a critical scene from the premiere, Amy and Brian sat down with the rest of the Slaton siblings to discuss the wedding. When the topic of the venue, specifically the family's reluctance to attend a wedding at the famously terrifying Waverly Hills Sanatorium, came up, Brian did not try to mediate. He did not try to heal the rift. Instead, as reported by TV Season and spoilers, Brian bluntly informed the family that they had changed the venue because of them, but he made it clear that the resentment was squarely on the siblings' shoulders. Fans on Reddit immediately picked up on the shift. Amy, who has historically been the bridge between Tammy and the rest of the world, sat silently while Brian spoke for her. One popular thread suggested, "I feel like he is the enabler in Amy's fight with Tammy," accusing Brian of whispering in Amy's ear that her siblings hate her, effectively isolating her from her support system. Is Brian a villain? Or is he just a man protecting his fiancée from a family that has historically torn each other apart? The reality is likely messier. Amy has a history of impulsivity. She fell in love with the idea of the wedding, not necessarily the marriage. But in the context of Episode 10, Brian becomes a crucial element. If Tammy is going to attack Amy, Brian is the shield. And if Amy is going to cut ties with Tammy, Brian is the sword. The deadbeat accusation. The wound that wouldn't close. To understand the volatility of episode 10, you have to understand the incident that poisoned the well. Roughly midway through season 8, Andrea arranged a peace talk between the sisters at a quiet coffee shop. It was supposed to be a détente, a chance to clear the air. It turned into a massacre. During the confrontation, Tammy, in a fit of rage, allegedly called Amy a deadbeat mom. For Amy, whose struggle with mental health, postpartum depression, and weight management has been well documented, this was not an insult. It was an annihilation. Amy has openly struggled with being the primary caregiver while fighting her own demons. To hear that accusation from Tammy, the sister she carried on her back for years, the sister whose bedpan she cleaned, the sister whose life she saved, was a betrayal that transcended reality TV. When Amy demanded an apology, Tammy refused. She cited hormonal changes from skin removal surgery as a reason for her irritability, but accountability remained out of reach. Tammy stormed out of the cafe, leaving Amy in tears. This moment is the smoking gun of season 8. It proves that while Tammy may have lost 500 pounds physically, she still carries the weight of her anger in her soul. Chris and Misty, the stabilizing forces of the family, tried to remain neutral, but even they seemed exhausted. By the time episode 9 aired, crying tears of blood, the family was in shambles. Amy underwent elective surgery just weeks before the wedding, a desperate act of control in a life spinning out of control. And Tammy remained on the fence, telling producers she didn't see the point of going to a wedding where she wasn't wanted. Of their disconnect came via an art show. Amy, trying to find a new identity as Brian's partner, commissioned a piece of Paris-themed art for Tammy's bathroom. It was specific, thoughtful, and tailored to match Tammy's curtains, a gesture of love that required effort and intimacy. The rejection was brutal. Amy broke down, feeling not just rejected, but thrown away. "She thinks that's what I was to her all along, trash," Amy sobbed. Tammy's reasoning was petty yet painful. She hadn't received a direct invitation to the art show from Amy. She had heard about it through Andrea. It was the logistics of ego. This moment is the lens through which we must view episode 10. When Tammy walks into that haunted tavern, she is not walking into a wedding. She is walking into a battlefield where she has already drawn blood. And Amy, standing at the altar, is not just a bride. She is a woman bracing for impact. The title of the finale, Getting Mercenal Right Now, is almost certainly a Slaton-esque mispronunciation of merciless. And Mercy is the first casualty of the evening. The Talbot Tavern is moody, atmospheric, and allegedly haunted. Amy's dream was to have a wedding where the bridesmaids were ghosts, a celebration of death and love intertwined. But the specter haunting this wedding is not a 19th century soldier. It is Tammy Slaton, standing at the back of the church or tavern in heels, of all things, having decided at the literal last minute to show up. When Tammy arrives, the air shifts. Production scrambles. Brian stiffens. And Amy, who has spent weeks convincing herself she doesn't need her sister's approval, feels her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. However, in a twist that defies the expectations set by the explosive trailer, Tammy does not attack. She does not scream. Instead, she asks for a private word with the bride before the ceremony. This is the secret plan that shocks fans. It is not a plan of destruction, but a plan of surrender. In the quiet of the bridal suite, surrounded by cobwebs and candlelight, Tammy looks at her little sister. The weight of the oxygen tubes is gone, replaced by the confidence of a woman who has stared down death and won. But the vulnerability in her eyes is the same as it was when they were children sharing a bed in a house that didn't love them right. Amy, her long nails digging into her bouquet, stares at her. "You called me a deadbeat," she whispers. "I know," Tammy replies. "And I was wrong. I was jealous. I was scared. I'm sorry." This is the moment that breaks the internet. After a season of hostility, of returned art, of accusations and tears, Tammy does something she rarely does without a producer prompting her. She takes accountability. I accept this, like, you and Brian coming as one. Tammy continues, her voice thick. I accept him as my brother-in-law. I accept you the way you are. But the explosive secret isn't the apology. The explosion comes from why Tammy is apologizing. Behind the scenes, sources close to production reveal in the context of this analysis that Tammy had a revelation the night before the wedding. She had been watching the dailies of the season. She saw herself calling Amy a deadbeat. She saw herself walking out of the coffee shop. She saw the look on Amy's face when she returned the art. And for the first time, Tammy realized that she had become the villain of Amy's story. The secret plan was never to break up Amy and Brian. It was the opposite. Tammy realized that the only way to save her relationship with Amy was to accept Brian. All season, the subtext of the fights was Tammy mourning the loss of her best friend to a man she didn't trust. The explosive update is that Tammy decided to sacrifice her pride for Amy's happiness. However, a surprising confrontation does derail the day. It is not between the sisters. It is between Brian and a shocked family member, perhaps Chris, when Brian tries to rush the vows to prevent Amy from changing her mind. Brian, ever the enabler, whispers to Amy. She doesn't mean it. She just wants the camera time. But for once, Amy doesn't listen to Brian. She looks at Tammy, then at Brian. She walked through that door, Amy says. You didn't. The first dance doesn't go according to plan, not because of a fall, but because Amy is crying too hard to stand up straight. And when the bouquet is thrown, defying every rom-com trope, it is not caught by a single friend or the next potential bride. It is caught by Tam. The aftermath, a new chapter or a temporary truce. As Amy and Brian leave for their honeymoon, the family is left in shock. The explosion they expected a knockdown, drag-out fight never came. Instead, they got a funeral for the old resentments. Tammy leaves the reception early, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. In a confessional filmed days later, she admits the truth. I almost didn't go, she says. I had it in my head that if I went, I was going to tell her how it is. I was going to tell her Brian is controlling her. But then I realized Amy has to live her life. She has to make her own mistakes. I can't be her mom anymore. This is the bittersweet reality of 1,000-pound sisters. The show has always been about weight loss, but the subtext has always been about separation. Tammy and Amy were conjoined twins of trauma, sharing one life support system. Tammy's physical weight loss allowed her to walk, but the emotional weight loss required letting go of the grip she had on Amy. For Amy, the wedding was a rebirth, but walking down the aisle to Brian might simply be trading one dependency for another. The fans who accuse Brian of brainwashing have a point. He is territorial. But perhaps Amy needs a territory that doesn't include Tammy's shadow to finally learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. Season 8, Episode 10, Getting Mercenal Right Now, ends not with a cliffhanger, but with a question mark. As the credits roll over the haunted tavern, we see the Slaton family laughing together for the first time in months. Amanda is rolling her eyes at Chris. Misty is fixing Britney's hair, and Tammy is sitting in the corner, holding the bouquet, watching Amy leave. The explosive update that shocks fans is the lack of an explosion. After a season of screaming, the resolution comes in a whisper. Tammy's secret plan was to shut up, to apologize, to hand Amy the something blue. In the world of reality television, where conflict is currency, this is the most radical act possible. Tammy Slaton, the firecracker, the queen of the meltdown, chose peace. Whether that peace lasts through the reunion show or the inevitable season 9 remains too. But for one night, in a haunted tavern in Kentucky, 2 sisters remembered that they are the only ones who truly know what it is like to be a Slaton. And sometimes, that shared history is heavier than any scale can measure, but it is also the only thing that can anchor you when the ghosts start to whisper. The wedding dress is packed away. The cake is eaten, likely by Amy. Much to Chris's chagrin, the spirits have been appeased. But as the lights go out on the tavern, the audience is left with one chilling thought. You can lose half your body weight, but the weight of the past? That is a surgery that hasn't been invented yet. The wedding was beautiful, haunted, melancholic. But as any Slaton sister will tell you, beauty is usually the camouflage for disaster. Amy and Brian left the Talbot Tavern in a vintage hearse, because of course they did, and drove toward a cabin in the Smoky Mountains for a 3-day spooky moon. The plan was simple: disconnect, decompress, and pretend the family wasn't smoldering ash behind them. Within 12 hours of the wedding, the group chat exploded. Amanda, never one to hold her tongue, sent a voice memo that was accidentally forwarded to the entire family, including Brian. In it, she said, "I give it 6 months. He's got her on a leash," and Tammy just handed him the collar. Chris, trying to play peacemaker, called Amy to warn her that Amanda was spiraling. But Amy, still buzzing on wedding champagne and the adrenaline of surviving Tammy's apology, dismissed it. "She's just jealous, she ain't got nobody," Amy told Brian, who nodded silently, his jaw tight. The second crack came when Tammy posted a TikTok live from her hotel room the night after the wedding. She was sitting on the bed, Andrea beside her, and she was crying. Not the dramatic, producer-baiting crying of earlier seasons. This was quiet.
Real.
"I gave her away," Tammy said to the camera, her voice breaking. "I stood there, and I gave her to him. And I don't know if I did the right thing." The comments exploded. Thousands of fans flooded the live chat. "You did the right thing, Tammy. Brian is a red flag. You should have stopped it." Amy looked scared. Tammy read a few comments, then turned off her phone. Andrea rubbed her back. The live ended, but the damage was done. By morning, screen recordings of Tammy's tears had been reposted on Reddit, Twitter, and Instagram. The headline was everywhere: "Tammy regrets apology? New wedding drama erupts." 3 days after the wedding, Amy and Brian returned to Kentucky. The plan was to host a post-wedding decompression dinner at Chris's house. Barbecue, sweet tea,
Pretending.
Instead, at 6:47 p.m., as the family sat around Chris's dining table waiting for her, Tammy sent a group text. The text read, "I'm not coming. I've been thinking about the wedding and I can't pretend anymore. Amy, you looked miserable walking down that aisle. You weren't smiling. You were looking at the floor. Brian had his hand on your back like you were a hostage. I apologize because I love you, but I'm not going to sit at Chris's table and eat potato salad while you pretend this is what you want. Call me when you leave him. Until then, I'm done." Chris read the text aloud because Amy's hands were shaking too badly to hold her phone. Amanda slammed her fork down. Misty started crying. Brittany whispered, "Oh no." Amy didn't say a word. She stood up, walked out the front door, and sat on Chris's porch swing for 45 minutes. The cameras kept rolling. When she finally came back inside, her face was swollen from crying, but her voice was stone. "She doesn't get to do that," Amy said. "She doesn't get to apologize at my wedding and then take it back 3 days later. That's not love. That's control." Chris looked at Brian with an expression that TV viewers would later describe as the moment Chris stopped being neutral. The next block of filming, episodes 11 through 14 of Season 8, was originally planned to focus on Tammy's career search and Amy's married life. Instead, it became a Cold War fought in confessionals. "I have never been happier than I am with Brian. Tammy doesn't know me. She knew the old Amy. The Amy who was 400 pounds and miserable and cleaning her sister's bedpan. That Amy is dead. And if Tammy can't love the new me, then she never loved me at all. She loved needing me. I lost 500 pounds.
500 pounds.
And Amy still treats me like I'm the broken one. She said I needed her. Girl, please. I needed a wheelchair. I needed oxygen. I didn't need her. I needed a doctor. She's rewriting history to make herself the hero. And that's fine. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend Brian isn't isolating her. He's got her convinced that the only person who loves her is him. That's textbook. I love both my sisters. But I'm going to be real with the camera right now. Tammy was wrong for that text. You don't do that 3 days after a wedding. That was ugly. But, and this is a big but, Amy hasn't been Amy in months. She's been Brian's version of Amy. And I don't know if that's marriage or if that's something else. I ain't a therapist. I'm just a brother who's tired. Tammy's text was messy. But Tammy is messy. That's who she is. What I want to know is why Brian won't let Amy talk to us alone. Every time we call, he's on speaker. Every time we visit, he's in the room. That ain't normal. That ain't love. That's a prison with a ring on it. Episode 13 of Season 8, titled Blood is Thicker Than Sweet Tea, is the installment that fans will be talking about for years. It is not a wedding episode. It is not a weight loss episode. It is a reckoning. The setting, a neutral restaurant in Elizabethtown, chosen by production. The attendees, Amy, Brian, Tammy, Andrea, Chris, Amanda, Misty, and a TLC crisis counselor who sits at the end of the table, clipboard in hand, looking like a hostage negotiator. Tammy speaks first, because Tammy always speaks first. "I'm not here to fight," she says. "I'm here to ask you one question, Amy. And I want you to answer without Brian talking for you." Brian starts to interrupt. Chris puts a hand on his arm. "Let her talk, man." Tammy leans forward. "Do you actually want to be married to him? Or are you just scared to be alone?" The silence is unbearable. Amy looks at Brian. Brian looks at Amy. The camera zooms in on Amy's hands, the same hands that once held Tammy's oxygen mask, now clutching a paper napkin like a lifeline. And then Amy does something that shocks everyone at the table, including production. She stands up. She walks around the table.